So that's my goal this time is to talk about a specific type of homeschooling. I think it's growing in more popularity, more known, or maybe it's like one of those things where if you buy a red car, all of a sudden you're seeing red cars. So maybe it's only popular to me. And so I'm looking to just kind of get a basis for what classical education is as a specific type of pedagogy. Let me read one of your quotes here from the What is Classical Education from Classical Academic Press. You say that all education is classical insofar as it is education. To be classical is part of the essential of what education is, not some different kind of thing, kind of the same thing. So we're always good about asking to define our terms on the show. So could you give us a definition of classical education and maybe some of the offshoots?
Right. Well, what I think I meant there in that quote, if I can interpret myself, is what we now call classical education is what all education was called until about the turn of the 20th century. And that only changes because of two sort of societal revolutions that happen in the late 19th century. One is the Industrial Revolution, where which causes people to start asking the question, should school be something other than academics? Maybe we should use schools for job training. And the other one, the other revolution was the psychology revolution. We don't have what we call psychology today until the late 19th century. And so that influence on education is responsible for the other emphasis in modern education, which is sort of the psychological emphasis. I was just reading today on some social media post about was it social and what's the other social and psychological learning or something like that. And I'm saying we can't even they can't even teach our children how to read and calculate, but we're going to talk about social and emotional learning. That's what it was. And, it's really none of the school's business. I mean, they have a hard enough time doing education. I don't have any confidence that they're going to do psychology really well. So, but that's what happened. So in the first several decades of the 20th century, first 2 decades, there was a huge fight, which a lot of people don't know about, which involved the new progressive educators, which the initial emphasis was this social, emotional, psychological emphasis from John Dewey, who was a professor of psychology. And that came into the schools, and that was the main impetus for the challenge to the old classical education. R.W. Livingston writes a book which we publish at Memoria Press called A Defense of Classical Education. And he writes that in 1917 because he's responding to all these progressive educators who are starting to influence school policy. And they have this big meeting at Princeton in 1917 that the president of Princeton calls and gets all the classical education people together and says, what are we going to do? Because all of these progressives are changing our schools. And they're not political activists. They don't do that very well. So they just come up with a plan to commission a study. And that's about all that came out of that meeting. And the progressives have taken over by the mid 1920s. And their emphasis is psychological, but it's also political. Their focus is to use schools to change society. That's what the initial progressive emphasis is. Then with the advent of William Hurd Kilpatrick in the 40s, another thing gets added to it, which is this vocational emphasis in schools. That the purpose of schools is not to change society through the school, but to use the school to adapt children to society. Dewey didn't like this, but it got packaged together with his progressive reforms, and that has been basically the emphasis of every education reform since that time. But what does it replace? It replaces what R.W. Livingston was talking about, which is education which has as its purpose two things. One is to make an individual person a better human being, with, of course, some idea of what an ideal human being is, right? It assumes that. And the other is to pass the more societal emphasis, which is to pass on our civilization, to pass on specifically Western civilization. Those are the two old emphases in classical education. So what I think I was saying in that quote was, so insofar as you're doing those two things, so insofar as you're passing on our civilization, our history, our literature, in addition to the sciences that our civilization has developed, um, and insofar as you are trying to develop each student into a better human being upon some paradigm of what a human being is, which as Christians, we have a certain specific emphasis there. Insofar as you're doing that, then you're doing classical education. You may just call it education, but that's what education used to mean.
Yeah. Um, uh, Louis Marcos, who I only read because you're a dangerous person to listen to because usually you have book recommendations, and I'm always looking forward to the next Memoria Press podcast, but also dreading it too because I'm trying not to have anything around me that would write things. But he wrote in his great book, Passing the Torch, which I really agree with you. That was a phenomenal book, a great primer for anybody. He wrote, "Education is soul formation, not social engineering." And I do have to say I've never cursed dead people more than Rousseau and Horace Mann after reading his book, which I think if a nonfiction book is getting you that worked up, then that's a good read. So
Mhm.
I definitely was appreciative of that.